earlier it was 3 feet. Later on, we have given it to 1 meter. Little bit we have increased. Next. This LIG scheme, this has 6 tenements per floor. Next. This is EWS. In this case, we have tried to give at least 1 bedroom for the EWS. This is our latest design, and whatever this bedroom is of small size, but we thought of giving it, which was not the case in earlier design. Next. Even this EWS has 6 tenements per floor. Next. This is our Valley Shilpa scheme for HIG and MIG. This is constructed in prefab. It has steel plus 14 floors. The main attraction of this scheme is this scheme has all the facilities like jogging track. You can see that all around that jogging track, clubhouse, and other amenities. Even ample of parking. HIG has 2 numbers of parking. Then this is plan of HIG unit. It has 4 bedrooms. Next. This is MIG. It has 2 bedrooms. Next. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am, for sharing your experiences. Affordable housing is the key word for some years to come. Fulfilling the requirements of housing of our nation is the government's target and our nation's requirement. A very enlightening presentation for all of us into the works of SIDCO. Today's newspaper has a very interesting news on social transformation, where a small village in Maharashtra has all the homes, not only run by women, but virtually owned by women. They have displayed their names and their mobile numbers as nameplates against each of their houses. They say this helps to get rid of the patriarchal mindset of the people. I now request Architect Suresh Singh, Principal, Rachana Sansad Academy of Architecture, and Mr. Arvind Mahajan, Regional Head, Ultratech Cement, to please come on stage and present bouquet and memento to our speaker, Architect Rekha Dhar. The next speaker we have will take us to a world that connects us to the yesterday of architecture with the today. Architect Kirtida Unwala, Principal Architect of K. Unwala Architects. Kirtida Unwala graduated from the Bandra School of Art in 1979 and is a recipient of Charles Wallace India Trust Scholarship for specialized training in architectural conservation from De Montfort University in UK. She has acquired specialized training in structural and materials conservation at the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. In private practice since 1983, she has coordinated and undertaken consultancy projects concerning restoration of historic buildings, including structural consolidation and architectural restoration of historic buildings, urban area analysis and documentation studies of historic districts, documentation and listing of heritage building, conservation guidelines of heritage precincts and settlements, adaptive reuse and interior restoration, landscape design, ecology, and environmental studies. She has been a teaching faculty at the JJ School of Art, Rizvi College of Architecture, and is currently a visiting faculty at the Master's course in Architectural Conservation at the Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute. She is also a visiting faculty in IIA's College of Architecture, Bandra, where she has undertaken special sessions on urban conservation for postgraduate courses in urban and regional planning. The conservation projects undertaken, to name a few, is Dahanu Environmental Study and Approach to Development Plan, Matheran Comprehensive Heritage Listing Proposal, Satara Town Heritage Listing, Area Action Plan for Agashi Virar, Restoration projects like Juma Masjid at Crawford Market, Afghan Church at Kolaba, projects within the Naval Dockyard, Mumbai, and some projects with the ASI Mysore Circle. Kirtida had remained a member of the Matheran Heritage Committee, Matheran Eco-Sensitive Zone Committee, and is presently a member of the Satara Regional Plan Board as an expert on heritage conservation. The topic of her presentation today is Conservation Conversations. Sounds interesting, so let's sit back and understand this architect Kirti Unwala.
Interesting, I presume. Thank you very much, Indian Institute of Architects, for inviting me for a session on conservation. Conservation is a field which is quite mixed up, not well understood by architects also. And therefore, sometimes to take just 15 minutes to get this across is going to be extremely difficult. What I plan to do is just to run through the projects that I have undertaken so far, but those will run in the background. So I have a request to the person who is using the computer to change the slides, to change them at least 2 in a minute. So it just gives you a glimpse. Otherwise, in the background, I'll be just talking about certain issues in conservation. And to begin with the issues, I would say that right at the onset, I myself had an issue with conservation. I started very late in life with this specialized field, graduating as an architect with an overwhelming will to do design and not look into history at all. I think at the helm of education systems, we have a dearth. And the dearth is not to understand history in the context of human cultural life cycles. It did not interest me either. It was just by chance that I came across a few fellow teachers who were architects that I started to look into the aspect of conservation. And right at the onset, I rebuffed it and I said that how can historic buildings be anything else but architecture? Why should it be put into this halo, into inverted commas, as the field of conservation? And this question mark led me into further dwelling into the field of conservation. Eventually it took me into a special scholarship when I went to UK to look at the way history is looked upon was quite different from the way we look at history. Very often we have questions from undergrad students who say, why conserve? What to conserve? What is the need for conservation? We are trained as architects. We are supposed to build for the future. Why are we looking at conservation at all? We should make place for new architecture. And these questions prevail. They've prevailed ever since with not only with students, also with clients, also with architects. My latest avatar, when I was looking into a kind of auditing of the existing heritage list of Mumbai, which is set up by the commissioner, we are looking at the heritage list of Mumbai from 1995 till today. And there have been many, many issues. So when we say listing, what is listing? And this is what takes us into this aspect of why conserve. Cultural significance of a place is something which is very dear to people like me in this practice. So when we say listing, what we do is very scientifically analyze every significance of the historic place. And I call it a place, not just a building. So if you look at the projects that have been displayed here, it is not only concentrating on a particular building, but it is going into areas, what we normally understand as architects from the 1995 list as precincts. So these are areas. Cultural significance and context is what it is all about. The education of architecture, and since I have been in the field of teaching for a very, very long time, and I've also remained a student for sure, it is a context which is very seldom understood. One, if you identify a building with its cultural significance and give it a certain significance and give it a kind of a grading, as we understand as grade 1, 2, 3, once that job is done, what is the next process is what conservation is all about. So it's quite a mixed bag. Context, as understood by undergrad students, also is very poor. And that is what I think the students who are sitting here, including architects who are sitting here, who are teachers at various colleges. I think if we start looking at a setting of a place, the amount of years that it has stood there, the amount of time and value that one attaches to that place or a building is conservation. It brings it to that idea of why should a particular style of a building be conserved. So there, as I said, though the questions are immense, if we simplify it, at the smallest of simplification is an understanding. So if one understands a context of time, who built it, if I built it today, will it fall into a category which can be called heritage of tomorrow? Does it have that value? Does it assign that kind of significance to the architecture that is being made today? Any piece of architecture is put into a certain setting. Our traditional towns, small towns, have been built along or alongside specific infrastructure. What are these infrastructures? The most basic infrastructure around which our traditional towns were built was around water. So it is a mixed bag. When you say a context, the context is human civilization built around the most basic of infrastructures with a sense of value assigned by the users. It is only today that we have people like us who are qualified in this aspect of designing for a context, which you may put into the realm of urban design or planning or any larger scopes. What does it revolve around? It revolves around human beings who need a basic amenity or a infrastructure. May it be a water body, may it be a railway line, may it be just simply economics. But it is this context which has built it, and it is this context which gives us a sense of history. We learn from it. And it is this learning which has to stay into every human psyche. And if this has to stay, then it has to be assigned a value. This value is what cultural significance assigns. So whenever listing is done, whether you see Matharan, whether you see Kambala Hill, whether you see Satara, what it identifies is this aspect of a value. And it is, and believe me, it is a very, very scientific evaluation system. We don't have the time today to go into it. But it is identified basically so that it can have a line of defense tomorrow. Today, when the Heritage Committee or we at the BMC are looking into people who come with issues about why should my building be listed, then we have an enough qualifying line of defense, and we say that it belongs to a certain history, it belongs to a certain scale, it belongs to a certain context, it belongs to a certain community, and it has to stay because that is our backbone of today's life. So it is basically done to have a line of defense and justification. But in spite of that, we have experienced, like in the case of Satara, if I would just make a small quote, we had a huge amount of opposition, as we always have, saying, why my building? Why not the next building? Why is it that normal residential buildings are listed? Because people live in it and we have aspirations. And why should it be listed? What do we get in return? And it is normally the economics which runs down. Everybody, I'm sure, as human beings, understands the need to conserve, especially architects who have, if one has designed a building, one surely understands the value of that building for tomorrow's life. But when it comes to listing it for preservation or for conservation, the objection begins. At the basic ground level, it is the economics. And therefore, it is very important that the listing of Mumbai or the listing of any other city builds up a special system whereby it sustains this aspect. And so the questions which are posed by owners of the place or users of the place does not become an issue. So cultural significance, its identification, its evaluation, and if all this is supported by an economic system, I'm sure nobody would have an objection. And as Indians, I'm sure the aspects of urbanization which have been portrayed in the past in the earlier sessions, urbanization is a transition from rural areas. So rural areas are at the very basic of our living lifestyles. And it is these lifestyles which give us a sense of value of the context. Cars, we do not like these contexts. So if it is a context which is very, very valuable to a human being as something which is close to the heart, is an environment which is peaceful, which is natural as far as possible, which gives us a piece of life and latitude to life, then those are the valuable lessons that we need to learn. So if these values have to be understood and evaluated and put into the context of today's design, then I think colleges have to set up special cells where they make the students understand this aspect of evaluating contexts. If such evaluations fall in place, I'm sure all the questions that have been asked in the past and today would not be posed. I think with that I can end my session. What you see in the end is something which is going to be an economic revival. It is a building right at the center of Flora Fountain. It was a dream of mine whenever I would look at the building and I would wish if I would do the building. And today I'm doing it. And what it is doing is giving it a lease of life. Zara is going to open up here as a flagship store. It's a very high-end economics. But there could be small-scale economics also, which can work for each of the historic buildings so that we sustain our history, so that we sustain our sense of life, and we have the same beautiful life that still persists in our rural areas. So with that, I would like to just end my session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a wonderful insight into the yesteryears and world of restoration and conservation. More than half of Mumbai thinks redevelopment. Hence, heritage listing is looked at one more compliance to be catered to. This presentation will make all of us think of valuing the past and think conservation. I'm sure many here will be keen to know more about this and even opt for a career in conservation. Thank you, ma'am. I request Architect Swapna Khade, Principal, Dr. Baliram Hire College of Architecture, and Mr. Altaf Shah from Birla Cement to please come on stage and present the bouquet and memento to our speaker, Architect Kirti Unwala.